Okay, so let's take a look at the 12-second clip that got Jimmy Kimmel into trouble, first of all, so that we can all make sure we're on the same page and that we know exactly, word for word, what was said, and why Jimmy Kimmel was bad for business.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from.
Well, there you have it. There's the 12 seconds that changed history right there, folks. So it's kind of funny how Jimmy Kimmel is after this whole, support me and my First Amendment rights thing, because he's actually quite the hypocrite here. Check this out.
It's been unusually quiet over the past few days because Trump has been banned from Twitter permanently. Trump has been suspended from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and even Snapchat. But don't worry, Mr. President, there are still plenty of apps you do have access to. You still have Spotify to drown out the sound of millions of people cheering as you leave. Not only did Trump get banned from Twitter, Google, Apple, and Amazon removed the Parler app from their platforms. Parler is where all the right-wingers gather to post QAnon nonsense and misspell the word parlor.
So why wasn't Jimmy defending Donald Trump for his First Amendment rights? He seemed to be okay with Donald Trump being canceled and to have his civil rights affected here. Why didn't he defend that? And also, what about Roseanne here? He didn't seem to have any problem with Roseanne. Why didn't he rush to Roseanne's defense for the First Amendment?
ABC decided to cancel their highest-rated show, Roseanne, following a tweet in which Roseanne compared an African-American woman, a former advisor to President Obama, to an ape, which did not sit well with ABC management or anyone with a brain, really. So they announced that this first season of the show is also its last. Just because Roseanne is gone doesn't mean the whole show has to go. The show must go on. That's what we say in show business.
Hey, so with the same token here, couldn't the Kimmel Show go on without Jimmy Kimmel as well? So it seems here he's just lambasting Roseanne and not protecting her First Amendment rights. So it's okay to cancel everybody else, but not Jimmy. Today we're going to examine the First Amendment rights. We're going to see if his First Amendment rights were violated. We're going to show you what the FCC is allowed to do and not allowed to do based on real documents online, not based on hearsay, not based on all the lies that everybody's been spreading around backwards and forwards here. And we're also going to look at the First Amendment. So let's take a look at that real quick. I want to make sure we are all on the same page here about what the First Amendment rights really are. And it's basically a tiny little paragraph, but so many court cases have come out of this. So here it is. Okay, so we go directly to the source. We're going right here to the National Archives, America's founding documents. And we're going to scroll down here to the U.S. Bill of Rights, and there is our First Amendment right here. And that's all there is to it. It's just one sentence, and it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And that's all there is to the First Amendment. So I just made this quick slide here to summarize the First Amendment for you. So, there's freedom of religion. So the First Amendment really covers a few different freedoms here for many different groups of people, which is why it's so frequently referred to. But you have, religion here for the churches. You have freedom of speech for individuals who can express opinions without government censorship. Jimmy Kimmel falls under right here is this. Of course, freedom of the press. The media can publish freely, holding government accountable. And then the right to assemble. Citizens can gather peacefully for protest, and citizens can appeal to the government. So there's your basic First Amendment. So the question here, folks, is did the government or did Donald Trump trample Jimmy Kimmel's First Amendment rights in any way? And so we also need to determine, did Jimmy Kimmel break the law in any way that would attract the full weight of the federal government to come slamming down on him and violating his First Amendment rights, as Kamala Harris said. Now, I want you to listen to what she said over the weekend here, because this just shows her complete ignorance and the lies that she's telling here. Listen to how insensitive she was being here to both Charlie Kirk's widow and to Charlie Kirk's fans, followers, or really to just any decent human being. Watch this.
When a president with a fragile ego couldn't take a joke and brought down the weight of the federal government to silence the voice of a citizen, folks spoke with their pocketbooks this week, and Jimmy Kimmel is now back on the air.
So you can see how really disturbing this is, that Kamala Harris is thinking this was a ha-ha funny joke, and shame on you if you don't laugh. You know what? I would really like to see Kamala Harris go and make that exact statement right directly to the face of Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, and see how funny that is. And go tell Erica that she should be laughing at this as well. As for the same hypocrisy here, look at what Kamala Harris posted a few years ago. She was all for censoring Donald Trump. And yet all of a sudden now she comes out of nowhere. She's a big proponent of the First Amendment. So look at Kamala Harris's post from back in September of 2019. She writes, look, let's be honest. Donald Trump's Twitter account should be suspended. And you know, while we're on this whole topic of cancel culture, folks, don't you think it's time we kind of did away with this whole cancel culture nonsense? I mean, do we really need to fire somebody because they said something wrong? That's what I'm still not really. In the case of Jimmy Kimmel, I think that his suspension was probably an adequate response for the fact that he violated an FCC ruling there. This way, nobody gets fined or anything, and he's just off the air a few days, and that was probably adequate enough. But all of these other people that you're hearing about getting fired for celebrating the Charlie Kirk shooting and all that, I don't really see the need to fire them. And, you know, where is the Christian forgiveness on both sides here, folks, really? So let's do away with all of that cancel culture nonsense. And by the way, Jimmy Kimmel wasn't the only one saying this kind of nonsense. If you look at what Occupy Democrats posted on September 12th, these guys post a lot of inflammatory and made-up stuff here like they did here, where it says, breaking, MAGA world flies into panic mode, as the grandmother of Charlie Kirk's suspected assassin, Tyler Robinson, reveals that his entire family is hardcore MAGA. The only thing they're forgetting to tell you here is that the suspect himself is not, and they're relying on some bogus testimony from his grandmother who says that he's never even talked to her about this kind of stuff. And then meanwhile, you look at interviews that his mother has done with the press, and it says, you know, she's talking about his radical shift in the last year, and she was saying here, at one point she told police her son dismissed Kirk's event as stupid venue and claimed Kirk spreads too much hate. And then right here, she also recounted heated arguments between Robinson and his father, who held sharply different views and regularly sparred over their competitive ideologies. So that's kind of interesting that Occupy Democrats would make up these lies. In fact, many celebrities were also dancing on Charlie's grave, like Stephen King. This one was really shocking here. So he actually had to come out and make an apology in public. He said, I was wrong and I apologize. I have deleted the post. But of course, everybody else saved it. But Stephen King had come out the day after the shooting, I think it was, and he said he advocated stoning gays to death. Just saying. So that was completely false. Completely fabricated, completely whatever you want to call it. We have to take the good, the bad, and the ugly with the First Amendment, right? Statement here in response that Charlie Kirk had made back in 2019. He says, I believe marriage is one man, one woman. Also, gay people should be welcome in the conservative movement, which he has welcomed them. And then, as Christians, we are called to love everyone. I will always stand against people who wish to establish their own personal values as a reason to kick others out of our movement. So you can see Charlie Kirk's position here was nothing what all of these people were claiming. And Stephen King had to keep coming back and apologizing. He goes, I have apologized. Charlie Kirk never advocating stoning gays to death. But the people were relentless on Stephen King, and he goes, oh, the horrible, evil, twisted liar apologizes. This is what I get for reading something on Twitter without fact-checking. Won't happen again. Okay. So for all the people that want to keep on lying and spreading lies about Charlie being a racist or being filled with hate or violence or wanting to stone gays, check this out when he was confronted by a fellow Christian.
I'm going to ask a very respectful question, as respectfully as I can. What does what they do in their private life concern you so much that you have to go up in front of a crowd? And
it is against God. That is
so.
Why.
Let me ask
Are
you a question.
Christian or not?
Do we live in a theocracy? Yes or no? No. Do we live in a theocracy?
You said you're a Christian. I
am a Christian. And do you know what? And guess what? I will say this. Part of being a Christian is appropriately interpreting what the theological says for the individual, but also means to be long-suffering and patient and loving and kind. Jesus Christ talked to all people. Jesus Christ went and did his ministry through Judea and Samaria, and he had dinner with tax collectors, and he had dinner with prostitutes, and he did his ministry in every part of the Mediterranean. What it means to be a Christian, my friend, is to be open-minded but firm in your beliefs, so you can have that belief. But if you say there's something inherently wrong with communicating or associating just because they make different personal decisions than you, sir, are not a conservative. Thanks for being here tonight.
In reality, the statement that Kimmel made wasn't really directed completely at Trump. He was addressing everybody that supports Trump, because you could hear what he said in it, remember?
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from.
And then, of course, you can tell Kamala told lies here because, A, it wasn't a joke, because Jimmy Kimmel's line there had no punchline to it. There was no satire to it. There was no joke to it. It was just his angry one-liner of dispelling a statement that was completely false. There was no truth to it whatsoever to the millions of people that might have been watching him that evening. In short, what Jimmy Kimmel did here is what we call news distortion. I'm also going to show you here that what Kamala Harris just said here in that statement was a complete lie. And talk about a typical drama queen over-exaggeration and just a mistruth of what happened. Trump did not send the full weight of the federal government down on him. I want you to name one agency that went and did anything from the government to Jimmy Kimmel. So did Donald Trump send the FBI to go investigate him? Did you see the FBI raid his offices? Did they come out with a bunch of boxes? I didn't see anything. Did they send ICE there to investigate Jimmy Kimmel, his staff, and maybe his household staff or anything like that? Nope, didn't see anything. Did they send the IRS to investigate Jimmy's taxes? No, they didn't. Did the Department of Justice show up? No. So no federal agency that I know of showed up anywhere and got involved. Not one. Not even the FCC. They didn't even touch him. They didn't do anything to him. Nothing. So why is she saying all of these lies that the full weight of the federal government? Oh my gosh. Yeah, so she of all people should have an understanding of this. So now, what law did Jimmy break here? So now that we know that no government agency showed up, well, what law did Jimmy break? Because Kamala Harris is trying to tell you that the entire government went after Jimmy. So what law did he break? Okay, so we've shown that Jimmy Kimmel did not break any laws. However, I'm going to show you that he did violate an FCC regulation that covers broadcast TV and radio stations. That's the one area where the FCC has jurisdiction, and you can't argue with them. For example, you can't curse on regular network TV, and you can't show nudity on regular network TV. Why? Because the FCC has regulations there for decency. That's why we used to have all of these, remember the network censors and all that? That every single show used to argue and fight with the network censors to try to get stuff past them. So the only thing he violated here is this rule here of the news distortion. And here's where they're saying it, broadcast news distortion. And you can read through all of the rest of this stuff here, what they're allowed to do and not do. But basically, the FCC's responsibility here is they have this policy against news distortion in over-the-air broadcast, which is local TV and radio, like I mentioned. And it's been there for 50 years. This is not a Trump thing. This wasn't Trump whining and moaning like a little schoolgirl, and so the FCC jumped in and blah, 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 blah. The FCC was already aware of this the next morning, as were the affiliate networks, who were equally pissed off about what Jimmy said the night before. So here it says, as a result, broadcasters are only subject to enforcement if it can be proven that they have deliberately distorted a factual news report, which is what Jimmy did here. How did he do that? Because, duh, everybody had already known for days that the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk was gay, was living with a man who was trans and in the middle of transforming into a woman, and that he was anti-MAGA, he was anti-Charlie Kirk, and he said death to fascists on his bullet and everything. So without a doubt, we already knew who the guy was, and this was definitely not a MAGA supporter. So for Jimmy Kimmel to come out and say that was slap in the face to everybody on the right. And see, look, let me tell you folks something. This is something I learned a long time ago in working even in corporate America. Not everybody's your friend. You might say something that you think is funny, and a few people around you might laugh, but you'll piss off a bunch of other people, and you can get in trouble for that. Your employer can fire you if you say something wrong or do something wrong, right? Even though it might not be against the law and they're not abusing your First Amendment rights, it's you went afoul of your employer here, which is sort of what Jimmy Kimmel did. You see, the problem with Jimmy Kimmel is he's so arrogant about all of this, and he's like even refusing to apologize. He's way up here. He thinks he's way up here, and everybody else is way down here, and so he thinks he can get away with whatever he wants. But ask him next time you see him, why doesn't he swear on his show? Why doesn't he have nudity? Because he knows he can't do that because it's a violation of FCC regulations. So why did he tell this lie, this news distortion? He thought he could get away with it. Okay, so the next morning, the FCC chairman appears on Benny Johnson's show, and he gives his opinion here. And that's all he stated was his opinion. He never said, we're going after Jimmy today. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Never once said that. So everybody just blew this out of proportion. They said the government's coming down on Jimmy. Trump sent the guy, blah, blah, blah. The chairman of the FCC, all he did was point out what was wrong and saying these affiliates have got to do something wrong. And by the way, they can't arrest Jimmy. This is not an arrestable crime. And they wouldn't even fine or charge him as far as I know because the agreement is between the FCC and the broadcast stations. So the FCC can only go after the broadcast stations and fine them. Here's what the FCC chairman said, because everybody's lying about it, so this should dispel everything, because they're relying on you not watching this video here, right here.
There's a very concerted effort to try to lie to the American people about the nature, as you indicated, of one of the most significant, newsworthy public interest acts that we've seen in a long time. And what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican motivated person. If that's what happened here with his conduct, that is really, really sick. And I've been very clear. They have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. We have a rule on the book that interprets a public interest standard that says news distortion is something that is prohibited. Likewise, we have a rule that addresses broadcast hoaxes. And so a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt. We are not going to run Kimmel anymore. At the end of the day, if we do get called upon to cast a vote on this, Disney will have a chance to put in their arguments and explain it. But, this is a very, very, serious issue right now for Disney.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
So again, there you have it. He was basically just firing a warning shot across the bow. The FCC didn't take any action. I didn't see any formal papers fined or any fines issued to anybody here. And so who really did take action then? Why was Kamala Harris lying about this? Why was she saying that the full weight of the federal government came down? I didn't see anything. Nobody did anything. Nobody moved in. So who did? Okay, so I made this slide here to kind of show you the behind the scenes of what was really happening here, the mechanics of what went on. So as you know, Disney and ABC produced the Jimmy Kimmel Show, and they give it to the network affiliates here to put out onto their ABC stations. And the two biggest ones really here are Nexstar with 28 stations and Sinclair with about 38 stations, depending on who you ask and who you get the numbers from. But basically, what they do is they pay Disney for the right to use Jimmy Kimmel, and then they broadcast it out to their public viewers here. They also receive money from their local advertisers, and Disney also receives money from national advertisers. So what happened was the day after everything hit the fan here was that Nexstar and Sinclair were both very upset over what Jimmy Kimmel said. And yes, they were probably aware of what the FCC chairman had said too. But remember, these guys were already mad at Jimmy to begin with because Jimmy Kimmel has been bad for business.
It's bad for business. So I lied.
Yeah, and so Nexstar releases this press release here saying that they're going to preempt Jimmy Kimmel. And that was, of course, the next morning after he made those statements there. So Nexstar here gave the reason why Mr. Kimmel's comments about the death of Mr. Kirk are offensive and insensitive at a critical time in our national political discourse. And we do not believe they reflect the spectrum of opinions, views, or values of the local communities in which we are located. Continuing to give Mr. Kimmel a broadcast platform in the communities we serve is simply not in the public interest at the current time, and we have made the difficult decision to preempt his show in an effort to let cooler heads prevail as we move toward the resumption of respectful, constructive dialogue. And really, that was about as good as you can make a statement there. That was like pretty crystal clear there. So you can see they weren't under pressure by anybody, although, one could argue, well, the FCC is going to do this. They didn't even say we're going to do this. They just said that Disney's got a problem on their hands and their affiliates need to do something because they are in violation, or they could be in violation. And he said, we could get called in to be the final judge on this. So it just doesn't seem here. I don't see any evidence where the FCC moved in. Nobody moved into Sinclair's offices and says, you guys got to do this. You just got to understand, some of these people are conservative as well and thought that it was very offensive. And if I owned a network like that, I would kind of be like really running nervous because they're getting phone calls from people. They're getting lawsuits already filed by law firms, and some of the advertisers were already starting to complain. But here's another reason that Jimmy was bad for business. So I made this series of slides here to show you the Jimmy Kimmel's viewership and how it has absolutely plummeted since 2016, when he started off here with 2.4 million subscribers. And you could see right around the first Trump administration, right in this area here, he dropped from about 2.1 million down to about 1.5 million. And then during the Biden administration, he enjoyed a little bit of a rise. And then towards the end of 2024 and into 2025, you can see it's just absolutely been decimated here. And I want to show you here on this next slide, the more viewers you have, the more advertising dollars you bring in. So it looks like he's been a drain on the economy over there at ABC ever since 2016. It's just been going downhill, downhill, downhill. And then if you look here, especially from last year to this year, so May 2024, he had 1.7 million viewers. But I want you to check something out here. Look at what happened here in June 2025, between June and August. So just in the span of about 2 months, he went from 1.77 million viewers all the way down. I mean, what a huge decimation, down to 1.1 million viewers. But even worse is when you look at here, this is the most coveted advertising demographic right here, of the viewers age 18 to 49. He's lost most of them from that group. Look at this. I mean, went from 209,000 last year down to 129,000 as of August of 2025. So Jimmy Kimmel was already in trouble anyway, and they were already receiving complaints at the affiliates anyway. And really, folks, a lot of this decline here in the past year or so, it can be really, I think, traced to the fact that, I mean, yeah, we know he's going to tell Trump jokes. He's been doing that for years. That's not the big deal. When he gets up there and just talks angry about how much he hates Trump or this and that and the other, it's, people start to get deaf to that kind of nonsense, to the white noise. They just don't want to hear it anymore. I think Jimmy Kimmel has lost touch with reality, with his viewership and what people want. People come home at the end of the day, they don't want to see more of this rhetoric and hate and politics nonsense. Make me laugh. Show me some musicians. Show me some good celebrities or something. What's on the minds of all of these people that are just heading for the exits in droves? They're tired of this nonsense. Just like I'm sure each and every one of you, just like we all know people that just sit there all day long on Facebook and post anti-Trump or anti-Kamala or anti-whoever all day long. And they sit there and they make these memes that are completely filled with falsehoods. and they publish them out there. And this is why people are finally tuning out. They're sick of seeing it all day long. So it seems like everybody's got this cancel culture mania going on here, adding into the soup mix here a bunch of lies that they're telling on top of that. And you can see everybody here has been misrepresenting what was actually happening here. At the end of the day, Jimmy Kimmel's First Amendment rights were not crushed. He did not get thrown in jail, or in any other way did the government move on him. So the entire operation here was done by the affiliate networks, which in their own are somewhat powerful too. And in the end of the day, Jimmy Kimmel simply ran afoul of his employers. But you can see what bubbled out of this was the hypocrisy that came out of Jimmy's side of the coin here. How, Donald Trump was cut off for 2 years, and Jimmy Kimmel just gets away with only a couple of days. But in reality, I don't think anybody should have had their accounts closed, because nowadays they can stick those little things on there that says this is not true, this has been proven to not be true, those sort of things. I see them all the time on Twitter. So anyway, I hope this solves the mystery for you of what really happened with Jimmy Kimmel. And let's hope that we don't have to come to this point again. So anyway, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see all of you on the next one.